Good to have an.
Hey, Pa.
That's good. Yeah, welcome. All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So are we good to go? Should we kick off?
Oh, yes, we can kick off. For those just joining us, Mr. Osinoiki is a global executive, an advisor, is a mentor, is personally my mentor. Is an investor, is a leadership coach, and is someone who is not just bearing all of these titles for bearing sake. He's had over 25 years experience globally across Europe, Africa, the US. He's built a very remarkable journey from the very, very low of low. He's been a security guard. So yes, no matter what your role is today, this is someone who started from, you know, from here. And today, up here. So please, I would like for us to milk this entire session, right? He's held leadership positions at PwC, Deliveroo, NASPAS, Procius, multiple, global companies across about 120 countries. And today is going to be walking us through how he's able to achieve that. So over to you now,
All
Mr.
right.
Shola.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Titilope, for hosting this event. So this event is brought to you by Journey to C-Suite. Check them out on YouTube and on LinkedIn, and you will see a lot of amazing information. So I am your speaker today, Olusola Osinoiki. She's already introduced me at Just Leadership Academy. I'll do a further introduction in a second, but let me just tell you what we're going to be talking about today. Building a global career, positioning yourself for influence and income growth. That's a lot to talk about, right? That's a big topic. And I was checking the registrations. Like I said earlier, 88 people registered for this. I think we're now at maybe 19, 20. And I know that there's a wide range. We have students, we have founders, we have operators. So it's a wide range to cover. So, and I have a lot of content. So what I suggest is let me go through the content. There's a lot of content. Once I go through the content in the next 40 minutes or so, we will pause for questions, and then it will be up to the moderator to decide how many questions we actually take. But I would also advise you that while I'm going through the slides, if thoughts come to you, use the chat board, use the chat to comment, and maybe if you want to not forget your question, you can also register your question there. So like I said, there's a lot to cover, and I might go a little bit fast, but what I would encourage you is that don't worry about trying to take too many notes, because I will work with Titilope to make sure everybody who registered actually gets a PDF copy of the slides. So you will get the slides. So don't worry too much about, okay, oh, I want to, unless there's something that really jumps out at you, I want to take a picture. That's fine. But you will get the slides so you can digest it fully later. All right. Enough intro. Let's crack on. Okay. So um I'm going to do a little bit more introduction about my career, because that's kind of why you're here. But just to kind of put context, I'm a father I like to say I'm a father of 4 children. I have 3 biological children, and my son is married to Funshaw, who is also the mother of my grandson. So yeah, by virtue of marriage, I have 4 children, and that's the picture there of me and my kids, and my wife, Moron Kumbi, who is a music entrepreneur who runs a music business in Lagos, Nigeria, and they teach all over the world, really. So yeah, check them out. It's called Kumbi's Music Company, and that's my grandson Sam, and that's me. All right. So, like I said, I'm going to quickly do something and tell you my story, because Harvard Business Review said this: to involve people at the deepest level, you need stories. And most of us on this call are Africans, and we know the power of stories. So I'm going to tell you my story quickly. I'm not going to be able to dive into it too much. I will skip through it very quickly, because there's a lot more concepts that I want to kind of focus on. I need to share my story to give you an idea of who it is that is talking to you. I know Titilope have kind of talked about my starting in a security job to where I am now, but I'm going to kind of take you through a few steps of my journey. So this is an intentionally busy slide because it covers 30 years thereabouts of my, or 30 plus years. So as so I graduated from University of Ife. That's the first box at the top there. I studied civil engineering, um, and when I when I was studying civil engineering, I had this flair to do something with writing, and hence, like Titi said, and I'll talk to you more about my books later on. I've written a couple of books, and so I went to work as a magazine editor in Lagos, just as a kind of part-time job. Then I went to do my NYSC, my National Youth Service. I worked as an engineer, building roads, bridges, um, houses, and the likes for my NYSC year. When I finished my NYSC, even though they wanted to retain me and give me a job, at the time, my fiance, who is my wife now, had moved to the UK. So this is before Jackpa. This was when doing Andrew checking out, right? And so I went to the UK, got to the UK in 1993. There were no jobs in civil engineering, and I didn't want to sit at home doing nothing. And so I went to work as a security guard. But the problem for me was that what I understood about security guard, I learned from Nigeria. So I only understood the concept of Megad. For those of you who are not Nigerian, Megad is like the guy who sits in front of your house and protects your house, kind of, if he's not asleep. And so, but what I discovered in the UK was that actually security guard was a profession, and there was methods and there was technology behind it. And so I met my first mentor, if you like. Her name was Amanda. She's what I call a job mentor, somebody who helped me do my job better. And Amanda really helped me, taught me what it was like to be a security guard. And I became like, I got promoted. And one day while I was working on the job, I was in a particular store in Manchester, and the manager tapped me on the shoulder and said I should go home. And I asked my boss why I was going home. She said because I was black. I was in a white neighborhood, and they didn't like having a black security guard. So I went back to my underground car park where I was working with Amanda. Amanda looked at me, she looked at me in the face and said, Shola, you're a graduate, right? Yeah, you're working security, but you're a graduate. You're bigger than this. Go out there and find a better security job. So I did. So I went out and went to work for a company called Securico. And I worked there as a security guard, but now I moved into plain clothes. So I was doing detective, I was doing bodyguarding, etc., etc. And one evening, so if you're tracking with me, I'm now down here. One evening when I was doing an 18-hour shift, protecting a care home, I saw on the board graduate placement for Black and Caribbean people. And I was like, oh, I'm Black, I'm a graduate. So I applied. When I made that application, I asked myself, what can I do that will stand me out? And I wrote at the bottom of the application, I'll give you 101% commitment. For those of you who've heard my story before, I've talked about this before. So 101% commitment got me an interview. At the interview, my boss asked me, well, not my boss, John Wilson was deputy director of Estates and Services, said, what do you mean by 101% commitment? I explained it to him, and then he said, you know what, I'm going to change this interview because for the last 18 months, you've been working as a security guard. How will you secure the University of Manchester? And based on that, you will get the job or not. And I told him a lot of things, which I think was a combination of James Bond and many other things. And he liked what I said, and I got the job. And so I started working as a graduate trainee, and the graduate trainee job was just for 1 year. And at the end of the 1 year, Ian, my boss, who was also my job mentor, said to me, we really like you. We don't have a job for you. Why don't you create a job for yourself? And so I created a job called technical clerk. 23 other people applied because at that time, UK was still in the EU, and they had to make sure that nobody else could do the job across the EU before they gave it to a guy that was coming that had Nigerian background. And I got the job, and I worked as a technical clerk for 2 years. I defined the job, and I defined into it an ability to learn how to program. And so after 2 years of doing that job, I learned enough programming to go out and get a job as an analyst programmer, programming in Visual Basic, JavaScript. And I went to work for the College of Law. This was all self-taught before YouTube, before Udemy and all these things. I taught myself just by looking on the internet and reading books and doing dummy Visual Basic programming. And interestingly, when I went for the interview, I aced the interview, but I was rubbish at the practical exam, the technical test. I got 0 out of 10. Luckily, Chris believed enough in me, came in me, taught me how to answer the questions, and I eventually got the pass mark, and I eventually got the job. Worked there for 2 years, and after 2 years, I wanted to kind of advance. By then, I was now programming in Power Builder, and I went to work for the GlaxoSmithKline. And at the time, I went in as a business intelligence specialist, working on business objects and data analytics. Way before what we're doing now, before big data was a thing. And I worked there, got 5 promotions in 7 years. I was a senior, became a lead. Went to work in Philadelphia, North Carolina. It was kind of the beginning of my travel. And even though when I was at the College of Law, I started traveling a little bit. And then I went to work for Accenture. And that's when I really globalized my job, worked in different parts of the world. And I'll tell you more about that as we go along. And then if you track with me, I then got headhunted by PricewaterhouseCoopers. I joined as a manager. Within 2 years, I became a senior manager. And then I got promoted to a director. After a couple of years, my boss told me that my face didn't fit, I'll never make partner. And again, you see in red all my mentors who helped me on my journey. I'll talk about mentorship later on. And then I went to work for Deliveroo, kind of like a headhunted. My network got me in. I'll talk about networks later. And I went to head up global operations for Deliveroo. At the time, Deliveroo was growing at 100,000%, says Deloitte, in 2016, 2017, 2018. Then I got headhunted by a company called Process Naspers. Many of you might not know them, but you will know the companies they own. They own PayU, OLX. They used to own MultiChoice, Sky Sports, etc. I went to work for them, worked in Germany for 5 years. And then after I was made redundant, I decided to come back to the UK and set up my own business. And that's what I do now. So that's a whistle stop tour, about 34 years or so of my career. But that's the backdrop of what I'm going to use to talk about everything I'm going to talk about for the rest of this session. Okay, so let's get into it. So I've told you a little bit about myself, and I told you that Harvard Business Review said that the most powerful way to really describe yourself is to tell stories. And so my biggest challenge as you think about globalizing your career or moving forward in whatever you're doing is you need to know thyself. Socrates said, know thyself. And there are 3 things that I encourage people to use to know thyself. One is Simon Sinek's book, or you can go and Google it. You can listen to his podcast where Simon Sinek talks about start with why. What is your why? Why are you here? Or what is your purpose? Another book by Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life. That could also be a helpful thing. So you need to know who you are. It's very key. Number 2, what are your strengths, your weaknesses? What opportunities do you see? And what threats are in your way? And then number 3 is SOA. So what are your strengths? What are the opportunities you see? What are your aspirations? And what results do you expect? All these things helps you know who you are, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a global role. That's you that wants to globalize your career. So taking time to really spend, particularly now as we come to the end of the year, as you plan out your goals for the next year, use these methodologies to kind of really discover yourself, who you are, who you're becoming, right? Okay. Now, let me give you some context to where we are right now. So the context is we're in a rapid advancing AI automation world, you know, and nobody is exempt, right? We have people from Cairo on this call. We have people from Ghana. I'm sure if I tell you to write in the chat, is AI in your country, you will tell me yes. But I think for those in Nigeria, AI is not just in Nigeria, it's very present. Let me give you 2 examples. One, there's a company I'm working with in Nigeria right now. They had to go to Sokoto to go and work on some automation because the best experts in this field are in Sokoto. 2 months ago, a friend of mine ran one of the largest AI conferences in Ilorin, right? There's technical hubs all over Nigeria. AI is not just a thing, it's a real thing. And most of you at some point today have interacted with AI, either with your email or whatever, your phone. If you have a phone, there's some element of AI in your phone. The workforce is shifting. The expectations of the workforce is shifting, and we'll talk very detailed about global roles in a second. there's economic uncertainty. For those of you that woke up in Nigeria on Boxing Day, you know what happened with Trump, etc. And then there's a faster cycle of disruption. So whatever happened in the world up until COVID 2000, it feels like, even though we're going into the 6th year since COVID, it feels like we've been through 20 years of change in the last 6 years. So we're in a faster cycle of disruption. Since ChatGPT came along in November 2022, that process has even sped up even more. We're in the world of automated cars, etc., etc. Now, let's put some context, some further context to this, right? Um, and you don't have time to read this, and I won't, but when you get the slides, you can click on this link and read the full report. So PwC, a company I used to work for, did a report, and they called it the future of work for 2030. And they came up with 5 key things. One, technology breakthroughs. We talked about that, AI. There's a whole heap of stuff going on there. There's a demographic shift. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. I'm a grandfather, and I think my grandson is a Gen Beta, I think. There's rapid urbanization. I mean, if you live in Lagos, you know what I'm talking about. 30 December is still going on, but at least you're at the tail end of it now. There's shift in economic power, Ukraine war, what's happening with all the countries in the world, with all the change, what's happening in the Western Africa with the former French countries that are now taking power back. And then there's resource scarcity. There's big change in sea levels, flooding, water shortage. And with AI, we're using a lot more water and energy. In fact, most of the AI companies are no more AI companies. They're now, resource energy companies. Elon Musk, Microsoft, all of them are buying up energy plants to be able to provide energy for the AI models. But there's a lot in this report, but it just shows you that the world of work is definitely changing, right? So when you get this, you can click on the link, Future of Work, or you can just Google it now, Future of Work, and you'll see the full report by PwC. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Lagos and I was doing a conference, an AI conference, and a guy, John Okoye, Orakwe, I want to just acknowledge him. He works for ProDevs. He brought my attention to this report by McKinsey, which talked about the fact that the workforce of the future will be a partnership of people, age, and that is, I mean, something that's happening now. There's a lot of agents, agentic AI. There's a lot of robots. There's a lot of people interacting with robots. I don't think, particularly in the West, I don't want to overstate it for Africa, but particularly in the West, I'm not sure anybody does any day job, particularly if you're a white collar job holder or a blue collar holder, actually, that you don't interact with some form of AI. And what this report is saying is that actually 2026, 2027, like there's going to be a big change. And so therefore you and I, the humans of the earth, need to get prepared and ready for a world which we're hoping will be more people-centric, but actually it will be people agents, people robots, agents to robots. Now, for those of you who are big, and I know there's one or two founders and developers on the call because I saw their names, that you're writing code that's causing agents to send agents on jobs. So, I mean, that's the world we're in. The world is definitely changing. And, I'll just say this one thing. The one area that I thought would be off limits would be medicine, right? But then my uncle, who's a doctor, has been a doctor for about 35 years in the UK, he recently told me that he goes into the office now once a week because most of his medicine is now done telemedicine. So that's a big culture shift where everybody went to the health center, went to the doctors, but now you call up the doctor. And in fact, hospitals are telling you now, before you come, please call and talk to our chatbot before you come and talk to us so that maybe it can resolve your issue. That's the world we're moving into. And, Nigeria, Africa is not far behind. Anybody on this call, maybe if you can just acknowledge that in the chat, that if you've used Chowdeck or Glovo or any food delivery company this year, oh no, not this year, this month, just put it in there. Just say I use Chowdeck. Just amuse me by putting it in there. Like I use Child Deck, or you just put it in the chat. And even in Cairo and Ghana, I'm sure there's lots of food delivery companies. But that's just the reality of the world we're living in, right? So yeah, thank you for those who are putting in the chat, just to get some interaction. Because me, I did talk a lot. Uber Eats, thank you. That's in Ghana. There's lots, right? This is the world we're living in, right? So when we think about a changing world, don't think too far from even your own very purse. Where does your money go now? Think about where your money is. And Tabalat, right? Tabalat. So that's a company that's owned by Delivery Hero, one of the organizations that we used to invest in. We invested about $1.5 billion into Delivery Hero. So, so that just proves my point. So with those who've responded, thank you. That the world we're moving into is a world of people, agents, and robots. Okay. So how does this affect me? Because this, I mean, all of what I've said, you can go and read up. So how does this affect you? So I'm going to try and bring it to life based on my own personal story. Try to bring it to life for you today, and just share a couple of principles and thoughts, and then we'll go into Q&A. There's a lot to cover. So I think I've said this already. The world is moving to remote first. I now know a lot of people who have more than one job. I have a friend who has 5 jobs. He lives, to be fair, he lives in Amsterdam, but he works all over the world. But he has 5 jobs because they're all remote. Salary benchmarking is changing. Skills probability is growing. Everybody knows about Andela, and now we have so many mini Andelas. If I count how many times this year somebody has come to me and said, "Oh, I'm going to be getting talent for the West from Africa." I don't know how many companies I've spoken to this year. At least 12 new ones. Forget about the ones that already exist, and forget about the ones I've already invested in. So, I mean, this whole idea of sending talent abroad or talent coming in is no new concept. So, but what I want to talk about today is there's 3 dimensions of global opportunity. One is global exposure, global competence, and global relevance. And this hopefully is going to help you start to think about how are you telling your own story? How are you preparing for a global career? So let's start with global exposure. The global exposure is more like it focuses on experience. It involves you seeing the world, meeting different people, diverse cultures, and understanding the different cultures. That's global exposure. And sometimes you don't even have to leave your house to get global exposure. I'm going to recommend a book for you to read later. It's called Culture Map. It's a book that really shows you what the different cultures are. And for anybody on this call, you probably either have some job that is global, or you're trying to get a job that is global. But what I'm saying is that the first element of globalizing yourself is about exposure. It's about experiences. It's about places that you go. And remember now with YouTube and virtual reality, you don't have to actually step into a country to begin to experience it. But you do have to put some time into getting exposure as to what is the world like in Italy? What's the world like in South Africa? And for those of you in Nigeria, I know a lot of you will say, I want to know what the world is like in UK, Canada, US. But you're in Nigeria. How many states have you been to? Right? Global exposure doesn't necessarily just mean um, foreign. You could also have global exposure internally, right? You expand out by, you know, for those of you who live in Lagos, you've never been to Abuja. But life in Abuja and life in Lagos are very different, like very, very different. Roads are wider, traffic is less, infrastructure works. And so getting global exposure doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I jumped on a plane and I went to Italy or I went to Dubai. The mindset of global exposure says, I want to be curious, I want to be inquisitive, I want to explore. Because you could travel to London and not explore the UK. I know a lot of people who live in different countries of the world, but they don't even understand the culture. And so take it from me that globalizing yourself starts with this global exposure, but global exposure is enhanced by travel but it's not limited to travel. Okay, do you get that? So might want to tweet that. Tweet that. Global exposure is enhanced by physical travel, but it's not limited to travel. Okay, so that's the first thing, first principle, global exposure. I'm going to circle back on this in a second when I go through all three. Number two, global competence. This focuses on skills involving knowing how to operate effectively or efficiently across borders, across cultures, across markets. So for you to be able to be going out and looking at a global role, you need global exposure, number one. Number two, you need global competence. You need to build skills and talents that helps you to know how to work across borders. I walked into a restaurant in London the other day, a Japanese restaurant, and the first thing they said to me, the first notice board you see is, please do not tip. Because in the Japanese culture, tipping is not a good thing, right? Whereas in the American culture, if you don't tip, you're seen as like and not a nice person. And in the Nigerian culture, it's almost like they don't even ask for tip with words anymore. When you park your car in a garage that you're paying for, the person that parks you will be looking at you, just look at your eyes, and almost like, "Where's my money?" You know. So global competence is about understanding the cultures in which you are working in, right? The Ghanaian culture is very different from the Nigerian culture. The culture in Egypt is very different. So if you're going to do business in those cultures, there's a way in which you do business. There's a way in which you conduct yourself. And this is very important. A lot of people want to go and get a global job, but they're not ready. They're not doing the work of global exposure, global competence building. The next and the last in the thrill is global relevance. So this focuses on impact. How are you building global relevance? This involves contributing meaningfully in a global context. And that, again, I use the word global here, but it doesn't mean you're outside your domain. You could be in Nigeria and be having global impact. But the focus about global relevance is the focus on impact. How are you creating opportunities, creating value? You know, when you go into LinkedIn, are you commenting on people's things in London, America? This morning, I was talking to somebody who lives in the US, and we're having this deep conversation. We're not in the same country, but we're having impact because it's about global relevance. So global relevance is about you impacting environments beyond um, um, impacting your environment beyond yourself. So I see a question there about, is LinkedIn of any relevance? It depends on where you are. Now, LinkedIn has been bastardized, but the truth of the matter is that LinkedIn is still, and I'm going to talk about that later. So we'll come back to that in a second, right? So three things here. Global exposure. Actually, I did a slide, a very horrible slide, but it's the only way I could come back to this topic. So it's a very horrible slide, and the people who are designers will be like, "Why did you make this slide like this?" Intentional. It's intentional because I wanted to kind of put this on the slide, white background, to say what I'm talking about here really boils down to three things. Exposure gives you awareness. When you have global exposure, which is at the top here, is about where you have been, what you have seen. It is the experience of being around different cultures, markets, ways of thinking. You have sat in the rooms, worked across borders, seen how things operate outside your home context. Exposure broadens perspective, but but on its own it's not enough. It does not mean effectiveness. So exposure, you got to go more than just getting a perspective, right? And so exposure gives you awareness. Competence is about you um, it's about what you do with the exposure that you have. So, okay, now you know that this happens in Dubai. What are you doing differently? How are you studying differently? A lot of people I've met, there's one a guy actually on the call who's working in Germany, right? Before, a lot of people who moved to Germany, before they went to Goethe Institute, they learned a bit of German because they were getting themselves exposed and then building up competence so that they could be relevant when they get to the environment. So exposure gives you awareness, competence gives you capability, and relevance gives you impact. So think about that when you reread this slide later on. Okay, so I've set the scene. Global exposure, global competence, global relevance. How is this relevant to my journey? I've told you my journey already. For those of you that came late, I kind of talked through my career, but here's some simple facts. Number one, I've worked in 16 countries around the world. So when I say work, I mean work for more than a day. I probably attended conferences in more, but I sat down and calculated how many countries have I worked more than a day in, where I was actually doing work. So I've worked in 16 countries around the world. I've lived in five, I think, but I've worked in 16 countries, right? So I've delivered value in 16 countries. But on a personal level, I have visited around 52 countries around the world. So 52 is not a lot compared to how many there are in the world. But what I try and do is try and visit 3 new countries every year, if possible. This year, 2025, I failed. I only added Qatar as my new country this year. But I did add new towns, new villages, new places. I moved house, moved to a different place. So um, you can still find your global exposure, global competence, and global relevance by exploring local markets also. Keeping an eye on time. Time is running away. Okay, and then my last point is maybe for you, you start with visiting 3 new states every year, right? Maybe you lived in Lagos all your life, but you've never been to. And then please, I know people are going to say, yeah, but roads are dangerous. I know. But you can find a pathway that is safe, right? Because people are doing it. People are traveling, and unfortunately, you heard the news of Anthony Joshua, who was in Lagos, and unfortunately, 2 of his friends died, right? So time doesn't have, time doesn't, um, we don't have time. So the earlier you start, the better. You know, I don't want to say take a risk, but you know what I mean. Try and find a safe way to explore 3 new states. Try and find a safe way to explore different countries. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily just mean travel. It could also mean just, I'm going to read up everything I can. I'm going to find out everything I can. I'm going to have a conference call with somebody in this country just to understand what their world is like. All right. So this is a deliberately complex table that I'm not going to, we're not going to discuss now, but it will be in your content material for you to look at. And it just talked about 5 areas as you look at global positioning. You talk about skills, talk about branding, talk about market relevance, talk about visibility, talk about sponsorship. Because ultimately, for you to really globalize yourself, you're going to need some level of sponsorship. Um, and AI can help, right? So a lot of what's in this table, it shows you how AI can help you, how AI can influence. And then I give you some actions that you can do. Build a skill stack that combines human expertise with AI um, fluency, right? If you want to be a global player, you're going to have some level of AI in what you're learning in today's market. So, like I said, this is not something we're going to talk about today, but I just kind of put it in here so that later on you can go and look at this in more detail and take what applies to you. So somebody asked a question about LinkedIn before. So I would say this, and I still think it's true until another platform appears that would do this differently. LinkedIn is your digital presence. But remember, we're not talking about just getting a job. We're talking about getting a global job, right? So I would say if you don't have a LinkedIn profile and you want to get a global job, my view, remember, this is my view. You could have a different view and you can maybe write in the chat that I got a job without having a LinkedIn profile. The truth of the matter is that CVs don't count for much these days. And I would actually say this, in the last 7 years, I have not hired anybody who doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. So you send me your CV, first thing I'm going to do is look for your LinkedIn profile. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I probably will not interview you. And before you say I'm cruel, I'm horrible, there's a company in America, in Australia, actually, I thought it was America, but I now found out that it's in Australia, that the CEO said, if you have a Hotmail email address, you won't get an interview. In fact, your CV goes straight into the bin. The algorithm checks email address, hotmail.com, bins it. Because it says that if you have a Hotmail email address, it means you're not moving forward with time. Now, remember, this is different. Each company has different rules, and if you want to be a global citizen, you need to understand what are the rules of the companies that you're applying to, right? Um, and so LinkedIn, yes, for now, right? It might change tomorrow, but for now, and yes, it is the worst place people are abusing it, but for now, your authentic digital presence and your global passport is your LinkedIn profile. And so you need to leverage it because the algorithm is looking at. There are a lot of application tracking systems now that don't even ask you for your CV. They just ask you for your LinkedIn profile. And based on your LinkedIn profile, they will see whether you're fit for the job or not. And actually, whether you like it or not, every single day, there is somebody who's looking at your LinkedIn profile to see whether there's an opportunity that is worth talking to you about. And I know a lot of people, I think at least I can tell many stories of people who were got jobs abroad because they were found on LinkedIn, particularly those in Germany. There are lots of people in Germany that I know that they didn't apply for a job abroad. A headhunter found them and they were in Lagos, Nigeria, and then they got a job in Germany, particularly Germany. Um, and particularly a company called Delivery Hero, which I know one of their staff is on this call. But the point is, if you really are interested in this, a global role, then your LinkedIn is the most powerful tool you have in your hand. All right. Okay. So let's build this out a little bit more. And I think I have, Mr. Tilakwa, how many minutes more do I have before I have to round this up and hand over to questions? Like 10 minutes?
We have enough time.
Okay. Okay. I'll
This
keep going.
is our session. Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. So, as part of this idea of thinking about um, a global career, because that's what we talked about, building out a global career increases your income. There are three C's I want you to think about. Competence, we already talked about in the context of global competence, but now I'm talking about it in terms of your technical credibility, your cross-functional excellence, and your execution strengths. That's your competence. That's what's going to get you into global positions. That's what's going to get you, maybe even let me start from a local job to a national job. If you can start working on building out your technical credibility, your cross-functional excellence, and your execution strengths, these are these are competence elements that are going to really stand you in good stead for you to get a bigger role, a global role. Your character, your integrity, your resilience, your multicultural awareness, your emotional intelligence. I've got a slide on emotional intelligence later on. And then capacity. What are you doing right now? Right? You might call yourself CEO of a company, but your company is 10 people. CEO of 10 people is very different from CEO of 10,000 people. When I was working for HSBC, I was basically designing systems for 100,000 people in 102 countries. So you're designing something, it just puts a whole different spin on design thinking. When you're designing a product for 100,000 people that sit in 102 countries, it's a different way, it's a different kind of capacity. You need to be able to navigate ambiguity and you need to lead with clarity. You can't, like when I was presenting back to the board about what we're actually going to do for position management for HSBC, the board constituted of 70 members. There were 70 members in the room, one from each line of business. And I had to convince that room that I knew what I was talking about and that we could go ahead with the project I was proposing. So those are three pillars of global leadership, right? I'm sharing a lot of maybe new concepts for you today, but just pick them up and we'll continue with it. So the next season will test your conviction. Conviction is a new word I'm introducing because For you to go out and get a global role, you need conviction. You need to believe in yourself. You need to stand firm in your conviction, in your belief, in your purpose, in your goal. You can't just have a wishy-washy mindset. Oh, I'm going to get a global role. No, you won't unless you're intentional about it. So conviction is very important, right? So global vision requires these three things: your conviction, your character, and your consistency to be connected. Character is the one thing that's coming through from the last three pillars. So the three pillars here is competence, character, and capacity. And but you're going to have to pass the conviction, character, and consistency test. What do I mean? You need to lead with character. I've talked about integrity, resilience. You need your core values to shine through. You need to be able to man up, if you like, and then you have to then show your commitment to be consistent. Show up every day with deliberate effort, deliberate intention. If you're going to go for a bigger job, let me just stick with, forget about global for a second. Just to go for a bigger job, you need to show up every day with deliberate effort. And like, I didn't get the promotions I got by just being average Joe, right? If you're going to go past your just average Joe, you're going to show up with a level of commitment and being consistent. So I talked to you about emotional intelligence. This is very, very interesting. So there's a guy called Daniel Goleman, a renowned philosopher, psychologist and author. If you go on Google, no, if you go on Amazon, you'll see many books he's written. And what he found out, this is very powerful. He found out that top performers, without 90% of top performers did not become there without emotional intelligence. So for you to be a top performer in the 90 percentile, you need to have a level of emotional intelligence, because your IQ, your skill was not enough to make you a top performer. Your job title was not enough. The fact that you worked hard, the fact that you had good skills was not enough. According to research, emotional intelligence, affects your decisions, your behavior, and your performance. And so if you're going to be a top performer, a global performer, a world-class leader, you need a high level of emotional intelligence. It's the one skill that consistently differentiates the best from the rest. What is emotional intelligence? Walking into a room and being able to read a room. Walking into a room and having empathy. Being self-aware, self-regulating. You're about to get upset, but you can control yourself. That emotional intelligence, just to say, for those of you, I'm going to say a Yoruba word, which is mikonle. Just breathe, breathe. You're about to get angry, but your intelligence tells you, if you blow it here, you've blown it. The interview is not going the way you want to go. Don't show your emotions. Just be calm. That's emotional intelligence. And what they're saying is, for you to be a top performer, you need emotional intelligence. And I would also say that for you to be successful in a larger role, a global role, you need a level of emotional intelligence. Sorry, like I said, I'm introducing a lot of concepts here, but hopefully it's all beginning to connect together. All right. So now we're just going to kind of throw some things in the air and try to join back everything together. So for you to be able to get to a place of global relevance, you need to do some key shifts. You need to stop thinking local and start thinking international. I could change the word international there to global, or I can just say you should stop thinking local and start thinking broader, right? You should stop looking for entitlement. Oh, this is owed to me. Oh, this is mine, right? But look more at ownership. Like, do you own the job in front of you? Do you own the process that's been handed to you? But for you to become a global player, you need to stop being entitled and being more ownership. You need to stop looking for, I'm just doing my 9 to 5, comfort. Look for comfort in your job, things that are easy for you. You can wake up and go to sleep. In fact, you know what to do. In fact, the work is so easy, you're not really stretched. So if you're not stretched, you're not growing, right? So if you want to get into global relevance, you need to go from comfort to stretch assignments, right? Push yourself and stop waiting for permission to position yourself for opportunity. Stop waiting and saying, when am I going to get my next promotion? Go ask for it. Some of my promotions I had to go and ask for it. I had to ask the question, when will I get this promotion? So there's a bit around, you've heard about the growth mindset. So yeah, it's a bit about putting on this idea of a growth mindset, right? So it's part of you becoming ready for global relevance, right? Next slide. So these behaviors that I'm going to list out here, and it's just a list. We don't have time to dive into all of them and the deep meaning of all of them, but just pick them up. Number one, professional discipline. Like, I know you can blame traffic. I know you can blame your wife, your husband, the guy next door, but you're in charge of your professional discipline. How you show up to events, how you show up, your own discipline in your own work. Do you check your emails? I once almost lost a promotion because I didn't discover that I had dyslexia and I had a lot of typos. And my boss was like, this is going to cost you a promotion if you don't fix it, right? So professional discipline is very important. Number two, consistency and excellence, right? I always say to people, if you don't like the company you're working for, you're not going to be able to drive to excellence. But if you want to get into global doors opening for you, you need to be consistently delivering excellence. It's not a prayer point. You need to be coachable. Coachability and humility is very key. I was talking to a founder this week, and everything I said, he had an answer for. I was like, dude, you're not coachable. I can't help you. You're not going to grow beyond yourself if you're not going to be coachable. You need curiosity. You need to be a lifelong learner, always looking to learn, observe something different, observe something new. Even places you've been once before, if you look at it again, you will learn something from it. Cultural fluency, right? Even for those who are just in Nigeria, how do you do business with an Hausa guy and how do you do business with an Igbo guy? How do you do business with a Yoruba guy? It's very, very different. How you operate in Balogun market is very different from how you operate when you go into a shop like Ebiano. It's just different. So you need to have a little bit of adaptability. And then maybe you also need to begin by being a thought leader and a contributor. And to the question I was asked before, is LinkedIn important? Yeah, it's very important because that's how people are going to begin to recognize you because you're a thought leader, you're sharing opinion, you're commenting, you're contributing. I'll talk about networking in a second, but this is a very important one. If you want to open global doors, if you want to open doors that are beyond yourself, that you want people to be calling you up for things, you need to start looking at how can you grow into being a thought leader. It's you're not going to get around that. You're going to need to have that, right? Funny enough, I'll just tell you a quick story. I wrote to somebody today. His name is David Ulrich. If you're in HR, you know him. He's like the godfather of HR, but he's probably in his early 60s now or late 60s. I don't know. And I wrote to him this morning on LinkedIn. I was like, dude, how do you keep so passionate? Like, you are the godfather of this business. How are you keeping so passionate and how are you keeping the energy going? And, he replied to me and explained that he's just passionate about doing what he does. And that's what it is to be a thought leader. Anyway, that's just an interesting thought that happened today. So your network. I think I have like 5 more slides and then I'm done. Your network is your net worth. I'm sure you've heard that before, but I have this five step of how you build your network. Number one, understand your network. Who's in your network? Are there people above you, below you? And generally, I would advocate that you can build your network on LinkedIn. And I would say, I think the last 4 jobs I've had, I got them because somebody found me on LinkedIn. Um, I didn't apply. Don't forget to note questions. Okay, yeah, questions. Okay, so understand your network, connect to your network, learn from your network. Give to your network, right? There's a guy on this call, Hillary. He's always giving back to me, reposting my stuff, commenting on it. That's how you give to your network. You know, and then connect others to your network. Don't be a bottleneck. Be a funnel. Be a door opener rather than a door closer. And if you do that, guess what? What goes around comes around. That's why this thing is like a circle. What goes around comes around. So that's networking. I mean, there's a lot more to say about that, but let's move on because of time. Um, And I think the people who put this together wanted me to talk a little bit about financial wisdom, right? Because at the end of the day, um, to get a global career, you need to be good with money. Financial wisdom isn't just about money; it's about freedom to take risks, pursue growth, navigate career opportunities, manage your income cycles. If you're going to push for a global role, maybe you need to start saving money for tickets, right? Because who knows when the opportunity is going to come. You need to find a way to protect your finances when pursuing global opportunities. For example, if you have a house in Nigeria and you're looking to go out and work abroad, how do you keep that going? You need to invest in yourself for the long term. It's not just really about what you earn now and what you hustle now. It's like we are living longer. Hey, I was looking at it the other day. My dad is in his late 80s. Been retired for almost 30 years, but he's still living life, enjoying life. So he had to do some things now in his what have been his today that meant that 30 years from now he will still be enjoying life. So yeah, I mean, I could share you lessons about redundancies, promotions, financial disciplines, but you can read that in my book. For those of you that get my book, um, that's that. Okay, we've talked about stories, but let's kind of, yeah, maybe just two things here. Like, you're not going to be young forever, so you need to prepare for the time when you won't have money coming in, and that's just financial discipline and budgeting and just managing. Rents are crazy in Lagos. Things are crazy everywhere. Not just Lagos; it's all over the world, though. It's everywhere. Even those that want to jackpot, they are trying to jackpot that because it's not easy, right? But a good skill you can learn is negotiation. Whether you're negotiating your rent, negotiating a salary, negotiating a promotion, negotiating a relationship, negotiation skills is a good mobility skill to have, right? All right, because of time, keep going. So, uh, if you want to be ready for promotion, and I think I've talked about this already, so like you need to invest in skills, certifications, you need to invest in your own financial discipline, you need to invest in strategic thinking, you need to invest in long-term career planning. Um, Anybody I mentor, I always ask them, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? What's your 5-year plan? Because everybody is interested in what's happening next month, next year, but what's happening in 2030? What you want to be doing in 2030? Because if you don't know what you want to be in 2030, how can you be planning towards it now? So there's an element of long-term career planning. It's very important. All right, we're getting close to the end. I'm going to skip this and say this. Like, when you think about moving into a global role, think about these 5 things as you're thinking about it. And again, I really want to go as if you want to move into your next role, if you want to move into a higher role, if you want to move into leadership, these 5 principles work. Number one, you need some level of mentorship, right? Somebody who's been where you're trying to go that can get you there. Number two, you need some level of personal development. Well, number three, you probably need some level of coaching, right? Coaching and mentorship are not the same. They're different things and they have different values that they add. And then if you really want to get that next job, you need to start getting experience. So if you don't have that experience in your day job, why don't you find some way to volunteer, some remote job, something that can start building experience in where you are trying to get to. And the final thing, if you want to keep growing, is you need a level of challenge. Don't settle for comfort. Look for challenge in your life. All right. So how do we go from where we are to where we want to be? So I'm gonna make an assumption that everybody on this call is very serious and they didn't just come and spend 1 hour with me talking. And so you're gonna think of maybe like a 90-day plan. What's a 90-day plan that you can do to start preparing yourself for the future? And I said, maybe first thing is what you want a skills upgrade. You want to increase your skills. You want to enroll on a course. You want to go on a workshop. You want to go for some kind of certification. You want to do a weekly practice. You want to do something. So maybe the first thing you could do is look at 2 or 3 things where you want to grow yourself. Number two, You want to build relationships. You want to use that LinkedIn, right? You want to get a mentor. You want to get some peers. You want to, even on this call, there are 28 people. Maybe you should just privately chat them up and say, would like to connect, right? Send me your LinkedIn profile. Maybe check in, do a check in. I reached out to a guy today who's a veteran in venture building and venture capital. I said, oh, in Q1, can I get some time in your diary? So even at my stage, I'm still doing this, let me even call it hustle in relationship building, right? So think about that. You can build a 90-day plan around this. You can look at how you can go and audit your LinkedIn profile, whether it's telling the story you wanted to tell. You can use LinkedIn to share stories. Um, you can, yeah, well done, Pelumi, for putting your LinkedIn out there. Put it out there. Who knows? This could be the room where great deals are made. Then think about habits to strengthen, like establish daily routines, reflections, track progress on a weekly basis, develop resilience, grow. Like there's a lot to say here, but let me keep going. Then the final thing is like, okay, if you're really interested in this international pursuits, then start applying for these jobs. Start looking at strategic projects. Start volunteering. Start putting out what kind of job, which country do you want to go for, which kind. Like people say, I want to jackpot, but to where? Where? You want to go to Germany, Jamaica, Australia? Where are you going? So take deliberate steps to position yourself for these opportunities. I don't do these talks without recommending books, and don't worry, I don't get any commission for any of these books. But Dr. Sue said this: the more you read, the more things you would know, the more you learn, the more places you will go. That's what I meant by you can go to places without traveling. And there's 6 books. Ram Chandra wrote a book on high potential leader, Tribe of Mentors, huge book. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure you can get a PDF somewhere. How to Lead Smart People, Betting on the Darkie, Culture Map, No Rules Rule by Netflix. Very, very powerful book with Erin Myers, who wrote Culture Map. And then I think Titi is also going to find some way of giving some people on this call one of my books as a gift. But for those of you who don't get that gift, you can check out my store online. Oh, that BT link didn't work. I don't know why. Anyway, I don't know what's happening. Okay, fine. But you can check out my store online. And I think, uh, yeah, and I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and take questions.
Thank you so much,
I think
Mr.
I
Oshola.
with my time, but it's fine.
That's okay. I had a swell time with you. You talked
Okay.
about exposure, and I really did love that you had mentioned, the fact that a lot of times people wait till they have the opportunity to travel and they think that is all that there is to it. Like exposure starts starting where you are, right? And actively being intentional about interacting with your environment, understanding your environment, right? Going
Yeah.
around the vicinity, connecting with your environment. And I also love the fact that you spoke about, um, you had spoken about even when you don't have the resources to move around. I know a lot of people who have never been to certain countries, but then they can tell you so many things about these countries and they've never been there just by educating themselves
Exactly.
from using the internet, right? One very good example of someone who didn't really have like the resources to go beyond my vicinity growing up. And by the power of the internet, I was able to expose myself to a world outside of my immediate environment. And I love that you spoke so much about that. And LinkedIn is one very powerful tool. I know Twitter guys here, if you're on Twitter, let me see your hands. Very mischievous people. We see a lot of interesting things about LinkedIn. But let me tell you something. We say all sorts of things and we go back to our homes and our beds and then leave the keyboard. But then in real life, there's a lot of people who have found opportunities that would never have met them if only, it's not that they were visible on a global platform. There's a lady that got a job at Google or thereabout, and then she mentioned that for many months she took it for granted because the recruiter just got into her DM, I checked out her profile, told her, oh, here's a link, apply, we're recruiting for this role, and that was it. She wasn't looking for it, she found it. Personally, there's been like tons of jobs. I think I can't remember the last time I actually applied actively to a job, unless maybe I'm trying to be intentional about going into a particular industry, right? Being out there, even for US, there's certain US visas, like the 0 to 1 visa. I don't know if anybody knows about it. That extraordinary, the visa for extraordinary people. Does anybody here know about it? I am not ready to look for a global job. Oh. By now, you should be researching, knowing about every program globally. And then on the 0 to 1 visa, some of the things that they require you is they want to see publications, things that you have done, things that you have written, things that shows, beyond the visible skills. Even if you're like pursuing a PhD or like some international programs, they ask you for your publications. They want to see the things that you've done. For people here, I don't know if anybody here has tried the Tech Nation for the UK. Anybody here? If you don't know about it, it's also a global talent program that allows people with very good experience, well talented people, people who are building up their career. Yeah, thank you. To apply for this visa, and once they can investigate and see that yes, you are truly a very quality talent to invest in, they then endorse you, and then you get qualified for the global talent visa. That allows you get a job anywhere without being tied there for 5 years. When you apply for these things, they ask you, what publications have you done? What have you written? So these things are, really amazing things. Another things you could do is write a blog, right? Do some of these things. They help you get found. They help you get discovered. They help people read, and it's the opportunity to showcase your work. CVs now are going out of fashion. Most times people ask you for your CV after you've gotten, the job, or after they've, looked at you and then they're interested in you. So yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Ashola. This has been really, really interesting. And I'm gonna go over to questions so that we can close out for the night.
Yeah.
Um, so before I go to the question on the form, Sheo Emmanuel has a question here that says, how do you advise on how to deal with unconscious bias when one tries to go for more global opportunities and roles? This is a very, very good question.
I mean, it's a loaded question, right? Because unconscious bias, that's the problem. It's unconscious, right? So that's the problem. I can help you with conscious bias, but unconscious bias is very hard. I think to deal with unconscious bias, maybe the best answer to say is you need to have a level of confidence in your own self, because you know that you're going up against potentially unconscious bias. The truth of the matter is that anybody who is going for a job outside their country, and that works both ways. Even if a European is looking to come and work in Nigeria, there's unconscious bias also around what do you know about our culture. So I think a lot of that has to come from you as an individual. How can you break those barriers when you come across them? Because I think the challenge is, like you said, is unconscious, right? So it's not something that, if it was something that was conscious, then you know that's a different battle. But when you're coming across unconscious bias, institutional racism, for example, how do you deal with that? I think a lot of that, because the only thing you can control, you can't control anybody, you can't control your interviewer. The only thing you can control is yourself, how you show up in that interview, how you show up when there's a stereotype, how you show up by distinguishing yourself. Like when I applied for that job at the University of Manchester, I put 101% commitment because I knew that there will be many Black people who want to apply for this job. And I said, how can I distinguish myself? How can I deal with, unconscious bias? That why would I give this guy a job? The story I didn't tell is that actually I was the last person on that program. After me, they shut the program down because there was another guy who came on the program and did not declare that he was in trouble with the police. And then they said, you see now, Black people, you can't trust them. And they shut down the program. So I was the first and only person that enjoyed that program. And because the other guy messed it up because he had a police record. And so that's somebody broke unconscious bias or conscious bias and created it, but then you know the
Somebody
program
go close, open it.
broke the program, you know. And I was just lucky that I was in. And not only that I was in, that I actually then was able to stay for longer. So, because at the end of the day, what then happened was, of course, the committee were like, well, if this guy did it, how do you know Shola hasn't got something? How do you know that Shola's not going to show up with something? And then 12 months later, they realized that no, this guy is a good guy. He's a hard worker. We want to keep him. So I think it's in your hands. The only one thing you have power of control over is your response to unconscious bias. Hopefully that's helpful. There was another question before that, which said, "Do I mentor people?" I
Oh, I
do,
see.
I do, but that's a story for another day. Find me on LinkedIn. Let's talk and bring your mullah
Okay.
with you.
Also has a question. Fatima is asking, what are the common mistakes early career professionals make when trying to position themselves for international opportunities? Two questions, but then I'll put that out first, then we can answer the second.
So, what mistakes do people make? I think,
Yes. Early
I
career
mean,
in particular.
yeah, I mean, particularly for early career professionals, I think the mistakes I've seen. Let me talk about the mistakes I've seen because that's easier. So, the mistake I've seen is that people tend to overinflate their own achievements. They lack humility because they feel like they have to be arrogant, they have to show that they know. But actually, a lot of organizations are tired of single shooters because what are you bringing to the table? Because AI can complement whatever you're bringing. But we're looking for people who are adaptable, who are humble, who are willing to learn. And I think some of the common mistakes I've seen with early career people is that they forget that they're on a learning curve. Right? No matter how well you've done in your country, wherever you're going to learn. And showing that adaptability, coachability, and learnability from the very beginning will make me choose you over somebody else because your qualifications don't really matter as much because the reality is that you don't have experience in this in domain. Maybe your skills matter, but your qualifications don't matter. Your skills matter, but most importantly is your adaptability for the change. And there are a few people on this call that I know who have left Nigeria and gone to work abroad. In fact, both of them worked in Germany, are working in Germany, and they can maybe add to that. But the point is, I think the mistake I see people making is that they don't approach these things with humility. Okay, so there's another question, right?
Yes. So she's our second question is, what would you advise someone who procrastinates a lot and finds it difficult to be consistent?
Okay, so what I would say to that person is, if you have access to a book called Atomic Habits, forgotten the author's name now, but somebody can help us find it and put a link in there. Atomic Habits, put a link in the message. It's a great book, and it basically breaks down how you build habits over time. And sometimes, I want to read a bit more, but maybe you just read 15 minutes more a day. And then before you know it, if you do it for 30 days, it then becomes a habit. You get used to reading for 15 minutes. If you're a professional procrastinator, maybe you just need to say, I'll do this tomorrow morning. Put it in your diary. Use everything around you. Use AI, build a script, right? Right, do whatever. Let me tell you a quick story, right? There's somebody who was trying to do their vision planning for 2026. I gave them a sample, and you know what they did overnight? Literally overnight, they used Lovable and they built an app because they said that if they don't have something that's going to track them, they're not going to do their vision planning very well. So they built an app overnight. So use technology to help you um, not to procrastinate, right? So have alarms, have calendar, ask ChatGPT to send you an email or whatever, right? And then there's a third question: how does one audit his or her own LinkedIn profile? There are many ways to do it. One, you can get your mentor or your coach to do it. Number two, you can just take your LinkedIn profile, go to Gemini, and say, audit my. It's that simple. ChatGPT sometimes will complain. So ChatGPT too can do it, but I find that Gemini seems to be a little bit better. But you can either use ChatGPT or Gemini and just say, audit my LinkedIn profile, what needs to change, what needs to be updated. That's the starting, that's the cheapest, fastest way. But you can actually go to professionals, you can actually talk to people, you can get a mentor, you can get a coach, you can get people. There are some organizations that actually help you make your LinkedIn better, but it's not free. But I would say the lowest hanging fruit for anybody on this call is just going to one of the GPTs and tell them to look at your profile and tell you what you need to improve or change. You will be shocked at how
Thank
accurate
you.
it can be. All right.
You. So we have this next interesting question, and Sashola has a book on this. So Ogunlaye Damilola, you're going to be getting The Art of Managing Up for Career Progression. So his question is, what can be done in a setting where you are being attacked and seen as a threat by your superior for being proactive? So he's going to answer this question now, but then he has a book.
Yeah.
Please send us, your details. We're gonna reach out to you. So Toyosi, please note that we're gonna send you this book, and then you can have that, you know, work that for you. Hi, Michelle. Do you want to answer the question now?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? And thank you. I've lost, where's my chat gone? I've lost my chat. Sorry. I don't know what I've done. Um, okay. I don't know what I've done. Anyway, it's fine. The question was, can you ask the question again? Because for some reason, I can't find my chat. I don't know what I did.
Okay. So he said, what can be done in a setting where you are being attacked and seen as
Oh,
a by your superior for being proactive?
okay. That, yeah, you're right. That question is answered in the book. But maybe
Yeah.
let me put it like this, right? There's a principle I talk in the book about laying low, understanding the environment you're in. I asked the question, why is your superior attacking you? Right? So take some time to find out about them, what makes them tick. Are you doing something that's ticking them off? Are you doing something? Are they a threat themselves? Are they worried about you? And then, depending on what you find out, you can adjust your behavior to it. Sometimes, when you're with somebody who is attacking you, the best thing to do is just to lay low. Right? Just, don't put your head above the parapet. Just allow things to happen naturally, right? And sometimes what you need to do is actually leave the organization because it's not in your best interest for you to stay. But hopefully don't worry, the book gives you a lot more insight to that question. So yeah, you're blessed or lucky to be getting the book.
So how do
All
you
right.
maneuver the global job market when you're pivoting from one career to the other and you have no employment experience in a new career? This is a very beautiful question. So we're gonna have a session on this next month.
Okay. All
But
right.
then
But before that um session, and maybe Titi, you two can chip in on this then. I think for me, I would say you need to choose your battles, right? So if you're trying to maneuver the global job market and you're also trying to pivot your career, you almost need to decide which one is the most important, which one is driving which one, right? Because on paper, right? So I'm going to talk in theory and then the practice. On paper, it's probably easier for you to move from a career you're already in into a global role because you're already in that career, you already meet the criteria, you have the experience that identifies it, right? So that's one way of doing it. But if you are trying to do those two things at the same time, change career and move into a global role, then there's something called academic qualification or certifications that enable you to do that. So the the only way you can make those two things happen simultaneously is if you've done your homework, where you've certified or you've done an exam or you've done some qualification that then means to the global market you're relevant, even though you're in one field, but you not have enough material to move into another field, right? So take a dentist who decides that he wants to get more into programming. He has to go out and learn React and learn this. And if he's passed all the exams, even though he's a doctor, his certifications or his qualifications now become the doorway that opens up the global market. But I think if you are just trying to maneuver a role and you haven't done the homework to get the qualifications, certifications, I would say hold off on your global ambition, do your transition from one career to another locally. And then once you build up enough experience, you can make that transition. Now, saying all of that, there are, like, for example, I moved from the UK, from Nigeria to the UK. I didn't get a civil engineering job. I was happy to start from the bottom. And so for me, the priority was to be with my fiance. And so I put global over career. And then I eventually built my career. So I would just say choose what is most important for you now and make sure you have all the ready tools to enable you to make that transition. Titi, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh yeah. So when it comes to pivoting from one career to another, I think I've transitioned a number of times.
Yeah, we know.
Yes. But then, sometimes within the same organization, sometimes outside. And one thing that has helped is volunteering. So find a way to use that skill somewhere that buys you experience. Okay. Nobody is going. So a good friend of mine transitioned from customer service into compliance. If you are very familiar with the fintech world, that is a very steep transition
Yeah,
because nobody wants, a newbie compliance person. Nobody wants, but then he transitioned, laid low in an organization, got the experience, and then pivoted into a unicorn,
yeah,
right? In Africa. And then, got there straight with the experience that she has gotten from her, volunteer role.
yeah,
And from there, today she told me, "Hi, Titi, guess what? I'm at Monzo Bank today in London." Right. So, find an opportunity to put that skill to use and use it to build experience. Okay. Look for organizations that need that skill that you have just learned, and then put some labor of love in, and then use that to gather experience. Use that to put your skill to use that a number of times, right? And then the bigger the volunteer role, even the better. So when you're applying, for a new job, it helps. You have something to show. Even for people who are moving to the UK, they tell you sometimes, oh, find a volunteer role somewhere, use that to gather UK experience, use that to gather, like, experience in that new thing that you have learned, right? And then put that forward in the paid job that you want. That's something I know as work a number of times for me, for people around me. Yeah. So you don't have to get an actual job, find a volunteer experience. People are looking for volunteers everywhere. If you go on LinkedIn now, if you reach out like 20 people, one, two, three, four, five people will say yes. Okay. And then use that opportunity to gather new experience, and then, and then put that forward in your new job.
yeah.
Okay, so Diana, if I'm able to get someone in Ghana to you, I can have the Managing Sudden Change book to you in your career journey, also written by Mr. Shola. But then we're going to reach out to you by email and talk about the details. So yes, so that we can round up. Another question that we have is: as remote work truly made it easier to build a global career? That's an interesting question, by the way.
I'm not sure whether it has or it hasn't, but what I would say is this: COVID, right? So COVID broke down the walls that made remote work possible. The reason why I'm hesitant on this question is because in 2025, a lot of the big tech companies are trying to force people back to the office. And so if you're trying to move into a tech role in a Google, Facebook, and you don't want to be going into the office, remote work wouldn't help you in that global move. But I would agree that remote working has made it possible for a lot of people to have global roles, global experience, because you can do this from the comfort of your home, right? Like I said earlier, I have a friend who works in Amsterdam and he has 5 jobs around the world. Um, so I think remote work has helped building a global career, but in certain areas, right? And I think one thing I didn't talk about properly because of time was what's your driver for your global career, right? Because sometimes people just want money. So I know a few people in Nigeria who have two global jobs. They work for an American company, they work for a UK company, and they just after mullah. They don't want to leave the country. They don't even want to go. They don't even want to go on holiday. They don't want to be earning dollars in Nigeria and living like nice lives. They don't want to travel for 30 December. They want 30 January, 30 February, 30 March, right? Because when you convert the dollars that you're earning, you can live a really good lifestyle. So I think your ambition around your global career is also important, right? Because if you're just looking for forex, then yeah, remote working really does help you because you can work any job from where you are. But if you really want global exposure, global competence, global relevance, remote working is one of the levers you would maneuver, but it doesn't get you to that full capacity, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Shola. And for
Yeah,
everyone who's
there was
yet to,
sorry, just one thing. Sheun Ogunyemi is advertising his services to help you build digital profiles. So patronize him. I don't know him from Adam, but yeah, he's been bold enough to put it out there. So yeah, patronize him.
yes, and congratulations to the two people who might be winners of the new books. And then we have 7 more books up for grabs. And to win it, you have to head over to our podcast channel, subscribe, watch the episode, and drop genuine comments. And we're going to reach out to you, get your details, and try to have the book across to you, as long as they're not in Atlantica or some country very far away. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Comment. And if you have more questions that they're not yet answered, we still have more time. Um, we still have like 5 more minutes before we leave today. So if you want to win more books, head over to our podcast channel, subscribe, watch the videos, drop genuine comments, and then we'll contact you to have the book across to you. And one more interesting question here that we have is for a student
Yeah,
who's currently, actively in school, but then
yeah.
also wants to generate money at the same time and is looking for a dollar job that can allow them achieve that. How can they go about it?
So that's an easy question because the key there is what skills do you have, right? So ultimately, if you're looking to raise cash, the question is what are you good at? What are you good at? What skills can you offer that would help you to make money? I'm sure you've heard of Fiverr, you've heard of Upwork. There are many other Nigerian versions of that. So you can hone your skill. And again, I will start with this. Like my daughters, well, one of my daughters, she was plaiting hair in university. She was in university in the UK, but she was plaiting hair to make extra money. So it doesn't all have to be tech, right? Just find something that you're good at, leverage it, build on it, be excellent at it, and then somebody will pay you for that service, and then you will build out money. It's really about building economics of scale, right? Okay.
And I think that's all that we have for tonight. How can you book a private mentoring session with Sashola? Okay, follow him on LinkedIn. I dropped his profile earlier. Let me look for it again and drop it. Okay. Follow him on LinkedIn, chat, connect with him, and I'm sure you guys will get talking.
All right. Okay.
That's
Thank you. Thank you so much, Journey to C-Suite, for
Yeah.
hosting me.
And we're glad that you accepted. We're going to have the slides sent to everyone